Well, good morning. Welcome to Wednesday morning's thought for today. If you've been with us yesterday or the day before, Monday, you'll know exactly where we are. We're in Mark chapter 8 and looking at verses 1 to 10. And we're trying to look at this passage of the feeding of the 4,000, almost as if the feeding of the 5,000 hadn't happened in chapter 6, because so often the two of them get held against each other, and chapter 6 gets considered in the feeding of the 5,000. Then we come to chapter 8 and the feeding of the 4,000. And it's almost as if, well, we're not going to look at that because it's the same thing as chapter 6. But it is, I believe, a very different circumstance and a different event as well. And even in that, we find differences which are not necessarily terribly obvious to us. And so we're trying to pick out some things from chapter 8, verses 1 to 10, that hopefully will help us as we try to consider this story as a standalone, regardless of anything that's come before it. So Jesus feeds the 4,000 in Mark chapter 8, verses 1 to 10. And really in this passage, we hear Jesus speaking in the first person. He appears more like in the third person in the feeding of the 5,000. But here we hear Jesus speaking and hear his voice. And we also, I think, get to hear something of Jesus' heart and Jesus' knowledge about the people who were with him that day. Now, bear in mind that this is a crowd of people, and they number in the region of 4,000, men, women, and children most likely. That's quite a size of a crowd. I don't know if you've ever been in a crowd that size, where you've been able to look and see everybody as they look back at you. I personally can't remember a time I've done it. But sometimes we've been in crowds where we feel just like one of the crowd, maybe at football or rugby matches or whatever. But this is Jesus looking at the crowd of people who were in front of him. And we get a great insight into just what Jesus knows about this crowd. And because of what Jesus knows about this crowd, this great crowd that Mark talks about in verse 1, we have this wonderful comfort and assurance that as the Lord looks at us, he also sees more about us than perhaps we realize. Let me try and explain what I mean. We're reading verse 2 today. These are the words of Jesus. He says, I have compassion on the crowd, speaking to his disciples, because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some have come from far away. Now, on face value, that's just simply Jesus saying we need to sort these people out before they go home. But Jesus knows so much more. How does Jesus know all about? Well, what does he know? First of all, what he knows is he has compassion on them. He doesn't look at them with any sense of, this is just a crowd. They mean nothing to me. I don't have to get engaged with them. This is me. That's them. There's a line between the two of us. But instead, he has compassion. His heart is going out to them. He cares for these people. And the same Lord that cared for these people, if you are one of his followers, he cares for you too, because he knows that you want to be with him and listen to him and follow his teaching. He has compassion on the crowd. Why? He's compassionate, we read, because he says, they have been with me now 3 days. 3 days. We thought about that yesterday, and the whole being discomforted, this feeling of being hungry or being tired or whatever, and these people haven't been put off. In other words, Jesus is saying, I have compassion for these folk because they've stuck with me. They haven't gone away. They wanted me, and because they wanted me and they've stuck with me 3 days, I have compassion on them. But he also knows that they've nothing to eat. Somehow Jesus knows that whatever food they've brought with them, most likely that food is gone. Maybe, as we thought on day one or Monday this week, that the food maybe went the first day. Maybe they had some left over for the second day. But Jesus is saying to his disciples, look, they've been here 3 days. The food's all gone. You might get a few bits and pieces if you go around them, but generally speaking, these folk have nothing. And he knew the situation of everyone. Now, we know that they gathered in 7 loaves. Now, I don't think necessarily of a loaf as the way we think of a sliced pan that you get from the supermarket or whatever, but this is most likely some sort of unleavened bread that they were able to bring with them and carry safely. But then he says, if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. So Jesus is saying, Some of you might suggest, well, let's send them home. And maybe there are bits of this dialogue that we haven't been able to record, or Mark didn't record. Maybe some of the disciples said to him, look, Jesus, just send them home. They've been with you 3 days. They need to go and get some food. Send them home. Jesus says, look, if I send them home and they're hungry, it's very, very, very likely that because of their blood sugar levels or whatever, they're going to collapse. They're not going to be able to make the journey home. So Jesus is saying, look, don't even consider the fact that I should send them home, because we've almost crossed that line. It's gone too far to simply send them home hungry. These people are maybe very close to collapsing, and Jesus knows their physical state. But he also says this wonderful line at the end of verse 3, and some of them have come from far away. Now, Jesus then is basically saying, I know where some of these people have come from. Some of them are not local. Some of them we did not pick up as we came through the last couple of villages. Some of these people have actually travelled quite a distance to be here. Jesus knew that some of the people there had come from somewhere else. This is a crowd of 4,000 people. How does Jesus know so much about them? He knows where they've come from. He knows how they're feeling. He knows what their physical state is like. He knows how much food they have. He knows how long they've been with him. He knows everything about this crowd. And he knows about every individual within that crowd. And because Jesus knows of every individual and every circumstance with every individual within this great crowd, he knows about you this morning. And this morning you might be saying to yourself, or this evening whenever you're listening to this, nobody knows how bad things are for me. Nobody knows how I'm feeling. Nobody knows the length I've had to go. Nobody knows the physical state, my health. Nobody knows how bad things are. That's not true. While we may not know, the humans around you, I am so certain, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, be encouraged today that Jesus knows about you, that he is aware of your circumstances, and he wants you to come closer to him, rather than withdrawing, rather than trying to retreat in any way, rather than going back to where you once were. He wants you to come closer to him so you can hear his voice and know his blessing this morning. And I pray that you would be not one of a crowd, but that you would see yourself as precious in the sight of the Lord, and that you would come near him today and allow him to convince you of his wonderful, amazing love for you, and that you would respond to that love in faith. Jesus knows about you and he cares about you. He has compassion on you this very day. So please be encouraged. Please be encouraged this Wednesday morning, and hopefully, God willing, we'll see you again tomorrow. God bless.